Good morning, friends. We'll begin our daily devotional in just a few moments. Good morning and welcome to our daily devotional from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn. Thank you for joining us on this Monday, February 22nd, 2021. And this week we are back in the book of Mark. In fact, we're going to be looking more closely at a passage that I've already been referring to a bit because we had spent some time in the week prior to last week when we were in First Peter. We had spent the week in Mark 9. Now we're going to go backwards to Mark 8. And there are two different sections, related sections that we're going to look at. Mark 8:31 through the end of the chapter, which is 38. Mark 8:31 through 38. I'm sorry, I said Mark 1. Mark 8, get it right here. Mark chapter 8, verses 31 through 38. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Okay, very strong words, and there are two distinct sections here, but clearly related. So, as I normally do on Monday, I'll kind of give an overview of this passage and talk just a couple of minutes about the sorts of things we'll be addressing this week. And the first section is verses 31 through 33. And this is the famous section in which Jesus addresses Peter as Satan. Now, there are differences of opinion here about whether it may have been more as if Jesus were saying that Satan was using Peter or something of that sort. The text actually makes it sound that that Jesus addressed Peter as Satan. So whatever the meaning there, it clearly means, I think it clearly shows that Peter, in some very essential sense, is being used by Satan and identified with Satan. But the main issue, of course, is the content and what it is that would make Jesus say this. Well, one of the things that makes the response so harsh, I think, really has to do with the relationship between um, the teacher and the disciple in almost any traditional in almost any traditional society, and that is that the disciple would never address his or her teacher in this way. And so the rebuke really does fit. Jesus' rebuke of Peter's rebuke really does fit with a traditional society in which a student would not address a teacher in this way. But of course, the other issue has to do with the fact that Peter is upset that this title, Son of Man, would be used to in relation to suffering, because Peter clearly did not think that the Son of Man should have to suffer in this way, or indeed would suffer, that it would be beneath someone with this title in the Jewish tradition to suffer in this way. However, we'll talk a little bit more about this. The title Son of Man is used in Daniel in a way that does seem to be associated with suffering, and perhaps it's that text that's being drawn in here. But we'll talk more about that. That's the first section, and then the related section, verses 34 through 38, have several famous phrases in this passage having to do with taking up your cross as a follower of Jesus. Yeah, there are lots of things we can address here, but the way in which it's probably connected to the section with Peter is that Peter appears to have been ashamed that Jesus would say things like this. And so the last verse says, that those who are ashamed of me and of my words, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So there seems to be a direct reference to Peter's shame that Jesus would talk so openly about suffering and death in relation to the Son of Man. Remember that that questions have been raised about Jesus' mental health and stability, and there's almost a sense here in which Peter seems very concerned, as if Jesus may be going off the deep end here, and this text deals very directly with this, and we'll talk about that. But a very, very powerful passage, and very difficult words, of course, to hear. Much of Christianity over the last century has been focused on blessings and the wonderful things that happen to the people of God, and especially getting lots and lots of blessings from God. This is a different story. This is something that has to do with things that we may not want to hear as Christians. So we're going to spend some time talking about that this week. All right, let's close with this word of prayer from W.E. Orchard's Book of Temple. O God, we have heard thy call sounding in our ears, in youth and in age, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, at morning and at eventide. In the voice of nature, from the page of history, leaping from the lips of men and women, stirring in our own thoughts, crying from our poor desolate hearts. Yet we have not yielded ourselves to thee. We've been afraid lest we should lose something dear to us, our comfort, our content, our pleasure. Yet refusing, we have lost our all, love and light and life itself. We've been afraid lest we should lose ourselves in thy being. lest the direction of our lives should be wrested from our hands, lest our wills should become as not our own. And now our wills are broken. We cannot direct our lives even where we would, and our very souls within are hard to find. We've been afraid of the burden of thy love. It seemed too hard to care for those we find it easier far to hate, to love those from whom our natures shrink, to break our heart over those who seem worthless, to spend our life for those who are hopeless. And now we are enslaved to self. We move among our fellows as aliens, afraid and lonely. We are weary of our carefulness and calculating ways. Oh, save us. Make us willing to be what we were meant to be. Give us the courage to forsake all and yield to thee before it is too late. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.